The cry that cut through the smoke covered everything. The war had ended just hours ago, but the battlefield still smelled like fire, metal, and death. Bodies of aliens, broken machines, and fallen soldiers lay everywhere. The sky above was dark. Nothing moved except one human soldier. His name was Daniel Graves. He walked slowly through the ruins, weapon ready, eyes sharp. He was tired, dirty, and hungry, but something made him stop. He heard a sound, a soft sound. Not wind, not a machine. It was a cry, a tiny cry, like a child. Daniel froze. His heart beat faster. He moved toward the sound, stepping over twisted metal and blackened bones. The smoke made it hard to see, but the cry came again, high-pitched and weak. Like someone crying for help, but with no strength left. Daniel reached the source, and what he saw made his chest tighten. Under a broken metal sheet, half covered in ash and dust, was a tiny alien girl. Her skin was a soft blue. Her eyes were wide, glowing faintly. Her arms hugged something close. Her mother's body, cold and still. The child looked up at Daniel. Her face was dirty. Blood had dried around one side of her head. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She just whispered, "Help." Daniel knelt slowly. His training told him to be careful. Alien children could be dangerous, traps, or worse, infected. But this one? She was shaking, skinny, weak. He dropped his weapon and reached out. She flinched, but didn't pull away. "Are you hurt?" Daniel asked softly. She didn't answer, just looked at him. Her lips were dry, her clothes were torn, and her tiny fingers still gripped her mother's hand. "I won't hurt you," he said. "You're safe now." Suddenly, a low growl came from behind him. Daniel turned fast. Shapes moved in the smoke. Tall, hungry beasts, not part of the army. Not soldiers. Scavengers. Monsters. They had smelled blood. They were coming. Daniel scooped the child into his arms. She gasped, but didn't fight him. "We have to move," he said. The creatures stepped closer. Their skin was rough and dark. Their mouths were wide, sharp teeth, red eyes. Not smart, but fast. Daniel ran. He jumped over rubble, ducked behind wreckage, boots slipping on ash. The girl clung to his chest. Her head pressed into his armor. "Don't let them take me," she whispered. "I won't," he said. He saw a broken transport ship, half buried, but its door still open. He rushed in and slammed the metal door behind them. It wouldn't lock. Damn it. He looked around. The ship was cold and dead. No power, no light. But it was shelter. The girl looked around too. Her voice was barely a breath. "They eat. Small ones first." Daniel stared at her. "What?" "They come after the weak. They wait. They always wait." Her voice. It wasn't normal. It sounded like someone who had seen things a child should never see. He knelt beside her. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated. "Xylee." "Well, Xylee, I'm Daniel. I'm a soldier. And I promise I'm not leaving you here." He wrapped her in his coat. Her body was ice cold. He gave her a few drops of water from his flask. She sipped slowly, watching the door the whole time. "They took my brother," she whispered suddenly. Daniel blinked. "What?" "My little brother. We were hiding. Then they came. They dragged him away. Mama tried to stop them. They... Her voice broke. She didn't need to finish. Daniel could guess. He stood up and looked around the dark ship. Shadows danced in every corner. "Where did they take him?" he asked. Xylee pointed to the back. "Under the floor." Daniel looked at her, then looked at the floor under the control panel. There was a hatch, slightly open, almost invisible. Something moved down there. A sound. Not a monster. A whisper. Another cry. Daniel felt a chill. Someone else was down there. Monsters in the mist. The child's whisper still echoed in Daniel's mind. Under the floor. He stared, At the hatch Xylee had pointed to, it was small, half-broken and almost hidden beneath shattered wires and scorched metal. A faint noise came from beneath it, soft like someone breathing, struggling. Daniel stepped closer. Xylee gripped his arm tightly. "Don't go, it's not safe." Her voice was shaking. Daniel knelt, brushed the wires aside and opened the hatch, slowly. A wave of warm, foul-smelling air rose up. The space beneath the floor was narrow, dark, and filled with old metal boxes and cloth scraps. Then, movement. A pair of eyes reflected in the dark. A child. Thin, pale blue skin. Shackled to the wall by the ankle. He looked like Xylee. Same glow in the eyes. But his mouth was gagged and bruises covered his arms. Xylee gasped. "Taro!" The boy blinked. Alive. Daniel moved fast. He slid into the hole and began pulling at the chain. But as soon as he touched the shackle, a strange click echoed from the wall. Red lights blinked. A trap. "Xylee, run!" Daniel shouted. The ship rumbled. Suddenly the outer door burst open, and in came the monsters, not just scavengers. These were mistborns, tall, cloaked in breathing fog with long claws and hollow eyes. They had been watching, waiting for someone to come close to their food. Xylee screamed. Daniel ripped the shackle loose and lifted the boy onto his back. The monsters hissed. Xylee backed into a corner. Her tiny hands were shaking. Daniel climbed out of the hole just as the first mistborn stepped inside. Its face was long, mouth stretched too wide. It growled and sniffed the air. Behind it, more shadows moved. Daniel pulled both children behind a metal crate. He reached into his pack and grabbed the last flare, his only light source. He lit it. A burst of red light filled the ship's dark hallway. The mistborns screamed. Their skin hated light. Daniel threw the flare down the hall. The mistborns followed it like moths, leaving the path behind them clear. "Now," he whispered. Xylee and her brother followed Daniel as he ran deeper into the wreck. They reached the engine, room empty, silent, but with another hatch at the back, an escape tunnel. "Maybe. Help me," Daniel said to Xylee. Together, they opened the hatch, and just in time. The mistborns had realized the trick. They were coming back. Daniel jumped down first, then caught both children as they climbed in. Your tunnel was tight, filled with pipes and dust, but safe. For now, they crawled for what felt like forever. Xylee clutched her brother's hand. "Don't fall asleep," she whispered to him. "You promised you'd come back." "I tried," Taro said weakly. Daniel kept moving, leading them with a small flashlight. "We're almost out," he said, "just a little longer." But Xylee looked back. She heard something crawling behind them. Another mistborn. One had followed. Daniel turned and aimed his pistol. He fired. The blast echoed in the tunnel, but the creature didn't stop. It slithered closer, claws scraping the metal. Daniel looked around. Nothing to block the path. Nothing to fight with. Then Taro whispered, "There's a word. Mama used it. It stopped them." "What word?" Daniel asked, desperate. Taro tried to remember. Xylee's eyes lit up. She stood and screamed a single word into the tunnel, a strange alien word, sharp, powerful. The creature froze. It backed away, slowly. Gone. Daniel stared at Xylee. What was that? She looked at him, tears in her eyes. Mama was one of them once, before she changed. She taught us the word. Only family can use it. Daniel understood now. These children weren't normal. They were part something else, part monster. But still, children. They reached the end of the tunnel and came out into the open night sky. The smoke had faded. The stars above were cold and silent. Xylee collapsed in Daniel's arms. Taro followed, breathing hard. They were safe. For now. But Daniel knew. This wasn't over. If the Mistborns had learned humans could resist them, they'd come again. And next time, They wouldn't be hunting just children. Inside the broken ship, the stars above were quiet, but inside Daniel's mind there was no silence. They had escaped the tunnel. They had escaped the Mistborn. But the battle was far from over. Daniel looked at the two alien children resting against the broken engine shell. Zeely's eyes were closed, but her hand never left her brother's. Taro's breathing was weak. His wrists were still red from the chains. Daniel scanned the area. They were behind the wrecked ship now, in a place the enemy might not search right away. But he knew they couldn't stay in the open. He had to return. Back inside. Back into the broken ship. The entrance he had sealed earlier had been destroyed. The Mistborns were smart. Smarter than they looked. But Daniel had no choice. He guided the children to a second access door on the lower deck. It was dented shut, rusted, but he pried it open with a metal rod. The darkness inside seemed deeper now. Cold. Still. Like something was waiting. He turned on his flashlight. "Stay behind me," he told them. The beam cut through the shadows. Dust floated in the air like ash. He stepped inside. The hallways were different now. The blood trails had dried. The flare's red light was long gone. But something strange was here. On the walls, symbols, drawn in chalk, circles, eyes, small handprints, Xylee. Looked at them and whispered. The other kids did that. They tried to leave signs. Daniel slowed. "How many were there?" he asked. 14, she answered. "Before. Then only 6. Then me." Daniel's jaw clenched. He walked forward carefully, passing broken control panels and shattered glass. Then they entered a large room, once the cafeteria. But now, it was a nest. The tables were stacked to form walls. Blankets and clothes were shredded and tied into hanging hammocks. And in the center, a pile of small bones. Not human. Daniel lowered his weapon. There were toys nearby. Broken, dirty, but still shaped like stars and animals. He picked one up, a wooden moon. Zeely stepped forward and picked up a small boot. "Tasha's," she said. She was kind. She shared food. Daniel looked at her. "Where is she now?" Zeely didn't answer. She placed the boot back on the floor. Suddenly, Taro gasped. He pointed toward the ceiling. A camera. Blinking. Someone was watching. Daniel aimed his flashlight upward. The camera clicked, then turned off. He ran to the corner and pulled away a panel, revealing a data core still glowing faintly. He plugged in his wrist pad and scanned it. Files loaded. One file stood out. Experiment, Hunger Trials, Sector D12. Daniel opened it. His eyes widened as he read. Subject children placed in isolation to observe instinct response, hunger behavior, and language development under fear pressure. Mistborns introduced on day 3. Escape attempt at 7% survival probability. Daniel's hands shook. They were never rescued. They were never supposed to be rescued. This ship was a lab. Test. The children were used. Watched. Broken. He looked at Zeely and Taro. They weren't survivors by luck. They were survivors of cruelty. He turned to the children. "We need to leave. Now." But the door behind them slammed shut. A voice came, through the ship's speaker system. Cold, robotic. Subject 7 and Subject 9 detected, retrieving. Zeely screamed. Daniel raised his gun and fired at the lock. Nothing. Gas began to hiss from the walls. A knockout agent. "No," Daniel growled. He grabbed both kids and ran to the side panel he had noticed earlier. He kicked it open. A crawl tunnel, one more way out. They crawled inside, coughing. The gas was slow, but it would follow. As they moved, Zeely whispered, "They told us not to speak, or they'd turn the light off forever." Taro nodded. "They made us forget how to cry." Daniel reached the end of the crawl space and pushed a hatch upward. Fresh air. They climbed out onto the side deck. But a figure stood there, tall, in a dark coat, with glowing red eyes, not Mistborn. A handler, someone who managed the lab. He raised a weapon. Daniel stepped forward, and Xylee stepped in front of him. The handler paused, stared. "Subject 7, stand down," he said. But Xylee's voice was calm. "I remember your real name." He froze. Xylee whispered something in a strange, soft language. The handler dropped the weapon and fell to his knees. Daniel didn't wait. He picked up the kids and ran, far from the ship, far from that nightmare. But even as the stars shined above them, he knew the real monsters were not the ones in the mist. They were the ones who called themselves human. A secret under the floor. The night was silent, but Daniel's mind wasn't. They had escaped, for now. Xylee and Taro were asleep beside him, huddled in a shallow crater under scraps of metal. The wrecked ship lay behind them like a dying beast, broken, still glowing in some places, and still dangerous. Daniel hadn't slept. He couldn't. Not after what he had read in the data core. These kids weren't just survivors. They were experiments. But there was more, something he hadn't told them. One line in the files haunted him. Primary subject, Xylee. Floor core lock, D7. Xylee wasn't just a test subject, she was the key to something hidden inside the ship, something called the floor core. At dawn, Xylee woke up. Her soft eyes blinked slowly. Daniel sat beside her and spoke gently. "There's something under the floor of that ship. Something important. Do you remember anything?" Xylee was quiet. Then she nodded. "There's a room. Mama told me never to go. She said it's where the cold whispers come from." Daniel frowned. "Whispers?" Xylee looked down. "Voices in the metal. They talk when you're alone. They say bad things." Taro gripped his sister's hand. "One boy went down there. He laughed for hours. Then he screamed. Then he stopped." Daniel stood up, heart heavy. He had to know what was down there. He guided the children to a safer spot, a hidden alcove in the wreckage with food packs and water he had found earlier. "I need to go alone," he told Xylee. "No," she said, softly. "It only opens if I'm there." Daniel stared at her. The data was right. They returned to the ship through the tunnel, quiet as shadows. Daniel led them back into the corridor. The symbols on the walls were still there, but now some had changed. Fresh ones, dripping. Someone or something had been here after them. They reached the control room. Xylee pointed to a circle on the floor. "That's the door," she whispered. Daniel looked closer. It was metal, but softer in the center, not a normal panel. It pulsed faintly, like it was alive. Xylee knelt, placed her hand on it, and whispered a word. The floor opened. A cold wind rose from below. Steps led down into darkness, lit by blue glowing crystals. They descended slowly. The walls were smooth, almost grown, not built. Then they reached the bottom. The room was round, silent, and humming. In the center, a cradle. Not for a baby, for a weapon. Daniel stepped forward. Inside the cradle was a small dark orb pulsing with strange symbols. It looked like it was breathing. "What is that?" he asked. Xylee's face turned pale. "That's what they wanted Mama to carry." Daniel's chest tightened. "You mean inside her?" She nodded. "She refused, so they used someone else." Daniel scanned the orb with his wrist pad. A message blinked on screen. "Core intelligence prototype, subject 0, activated if removed from biological host." Daniel understood. Now the children weren't the target. They were vessels, tests. This thing wasn't just alive, it was meant to be born. From them. Xylee backed away. "It talks to me when I sleep. I don't like it," Taro whispered. "It makes dreams heavy." Suddenly, the orb pulsed brighter. Daniel stepped back, And then, a voice echoed inside their heads. You returned. Host incomplete. Choose the carrier. The walls began to shift. A face appeared in the metal, shaped from wires and shadow. It looked like a child's face, but twisted, broken, filled with static. Zeely screamed. Daniel fired his weapon at the orb. It cracked, but didn't break. The voice hissed in pain. You harmed the child of the void? Daniel pulled both kids close. We're leaving, he growled, but the room's walls began to close. Then Zeely did something unexpected. She walked toward the orb. She placed her hand on it again and said, the same word she used to open the floor. Everything stopped. The light faded. The voice vanished. The orb went dark. Zeely turned to Daniel, her eyes glowing slightly. It was mine once, but not anymore. Daniel rushed forward and picked her up. No, one's using you again, he said. He crushed the orb under his boot. This time it shattered. No scream came, just silence, a deep, peaceful silence. They left the room, the floor sealed behind them forever. That night, under the stars, Daniel looked at Zeely and Taro as they slept. He didn't know what they were anymore. Not just alien children, not just victims, but something powerful and very, very human. The brother in chains. The stars flickered like cold eyes in the night sky. Daniel sat near the campfire made from broken circuit boards and dried fuel lines. The orange glow barely warmed the air. Zeely was asleep, curled against her brother. But, Taro, he wasn't resting. He was shivering. Not from cold, from something inside. Daniel leaned closer. Are you okay? Taro didn't look up. His hands were trembling. I still feel it, he said softly. The chain, even though it's gone. Daniel frowned. You're free now. But the boy shook his head. Not all chains are on the outside. Morning came. Zeely was the first to wake. She looked at her brother, touched his forehead, and whispered a word Daniel didn't understand. Taro blinked. For a moment his eyes flashed red, then blue again. Daniel noticed it. What was that? Zeely didn't answer. Not right away. Then she said, They did more to him than to me. Daniel stood. What do you mean? They gave him something. Not like the orb. Something worse. Daniel made a choice. He had to know. He took the kids back inside the ship, this time heading toward the medbay. The power was gone, but the data cores were still humming faintly. He hacked into the console. A few screens came alive. He typed in the name, Taro. File found. Subject 9, behavioral implant. Level 3 control. Failsafe embedded in brainstem. Activates upon signal. Subject enters aggressive, controlled state. Loyalty to handler only. Remote override possible. Daniel stepped back, horrified. They didn't just test him, they turned him into a weapon. Zeely looked at the file. They made him hurt others, she whispered. Taro sat on the med table, quiet. Then he spoke, his voice flat. I remember the orders, the screams, but not the faces. Daniel knelt beside him. It's not your fault. Taro looked up. But what if they call me again? Suddenly a noise, a sharp ping in the control room. Daniel rushed to the panel. A signal was coming in. A command signal. The activation code. Someone out there had found them. Someone wanted Taro back under control. Daniel shouted, Get down! But it was too late. Taro froze. His body stiffened, eyes turned red. He stood up slowly, face blank. Zeely screamed, Taro, no! The boy stepped forward, fists clenched, but he wasn't seeing them anymore. Daniel raised his weapon. I don't want to hurt you, kid. Zeely ran between them. No, he's still in there. Daniel hesitated. Taro's hand twitched. He stepped forward again. Then Zeely grabbed his face and whispered something. So soft, it wasn't even a word. Taro stopped. His hands shook, his eyes turned. Purple, then blue. He collapsed into Xylie's arms, breathing fast. The signal had been broken. By her. Daniel helped lay the boy down. "What did you do?" he asked. Xylie looked up. I reminded him of home. Before all of this. Before the cages. Tears rolled down her face. "He's my brother. No one gets to control him again." Daniel turned back to the console. The signal, they had tracked it. He now had coordinates. A control tower. Not far. Hidden deep in the canyon. It still had full systems. If he could get there, maybe he could destroy the implant permanently. Or find the people who built this nightmare. He looked back at the sleeping children. He had started as a soldier. Now he was something else. A guardian. A protector. He checked his weapon, looked at the map, and whispered to himself, "I'm coming for you." The monster that watches, the canyon was cold. Wind howled between jagged black rocks like ghosts crying in the dark. Daniel stood at the edge, staring at the tower carved into the cliff wall. No windows, no doors at ground level. Just a metal hatch halfway up the rock face, hidden from casual eyes. But Daniel wasn't casual anymore. He had a mission. Inside that tower was the control center, the one that tried to turn Taro into a monster again, the one that had hurt children, watched them suffer, whispered into their minds. Xylie and Taro waited in a small cave behind him. Daniel turned on his body cam. "If I don't make it back," he whispered, "someone has to know what they did." He climbed carefully. The path up was narrow and crumbling, but Daniel was trained for worse. He reached the hatch. Old symbols were painted beside it, symbols from Xylie's dreams. Circles within circles. And eyes. Always the eyes. He touched the panel. It hissed open. He stepped inside. Darkness. And silence. The walls were smooth metal, but warm to the touch. The hallway bent slightly, like a curve around something large and hidden. Red lights blinked every few feet. Daniel moved forward slowly, weapon ready. Then he saw the first door. It opened on its own. Inside, a viewing room. Screens covered the walls, all showing footage of children, laughing, crying, screaming, hiding. Thousands of hours. Some were Xylie, some were Taro, some were gone. Daniel's hand shook as he looked at the main screen. A file was open. Live feed, subject 7. A camera feed showed Xylie, in the cave. Right now. She looked up, directly at the camera. Daniel's blood ran cold. Then the voice came. Soft, slithering. "You returned. Good. We've been watching." Daniel spun around. No one was there, but the shadows moved. "You broke the orb. You silenced the signal. You think you won. But Xylie is still ours. Her blood sings with us." Daniel gritted his teeth. "Show yourself." "I already have." Wall shifted, and behind it was a glass chamber. Inside was a creature, humanoid but not human. Skin pale and stretched, eyes deep and black. Tubes ran from its body into the walls, a label above it. Project, the monitor had opened its eyes. Daniel raised his gun. "Let them go. Let all of them go." The creature blinked slowly. "You are not special, human. Just another piece. Another. Part of the test," Daniel fired. The glass cracked but didn't break. The monitor smiled. "Do you think this ends here? The children are only the first wave." Suddenly, gas hissed from the vents. Daniel grabbed his mask and backed toward the hall, but the creature kept talking. "Xylie is the key, but Taro, he is the weapon." Daniel reached the next chamber, control center. He smashed the console and yanked out the control chips. Alarms blared, sirens screamed, lights flashed. The tower was shutting down. But so was its defense system. A loud mechanical noise echoed from below. Something had been released. Daniel ran. Through the halls, back to the hatch. He slid down the canyon wall as the tower behind him exploded from within, sending smoke and shards flying into the air. But something else rose from the smoke. Wings. Metal wings. A creature, not flesh. Not machine, but both. Flew upward, searching, scanning. Daniel rolled into the cave just in time. Zelie ran to him. What happened? Taro stared at the sky. They let it out, Daniel panted. They called it the Monitor. But that was never the real monster. He looked at Zelie. It's what's coming next. The cry that changed everything. The sky was red now. Not from sunset, but from fire. The tower behind them had collapsed, but the thing inside it, the thing they called the Monitor, was free. It moved through the sky like a shadow made of metal and hatred, scanning for Zelie and Taro. They were no longer just children. They were the last keys to a program long buried. A program meant to end wars by turning children into gods or monsters. Daniel stood in front of the cave with his rifle aimed high. Zelie held Taro's hand tightly. Taro whispered, I can feel it calling again. Daniel turned. Don't listen. You're stronger than it. Zelie's voice was calm but shaking. It knows where we are. It's coming. Suddenly the earth trembled. From the forest below the cliff, trees snapped. A shockwave rippled across the land. Then it appeared. The Monitor had changed. No longer a creature in a tube. It had grown wings, armor, a second face on its chest. Zelie's face, twisted and cold. It hovered above the cave. A voice came deep and everywhere. Child, return. The world is broken. Only you can fix it. Come home. Zelie stepped forward. Daniel grabbed her shoulder. No. She looked at him, tears in her glowing eyes. I have to end this. Taro held her hand tighter. Not alone. Zelie took a step closer to the edge. She raised both hands and screamed, not in fear but in a song. A call, a language the stars remembered, a command older than war. The Monitor shook. Its wings faltered. It screamed back louder, waves of sound that shook the stones. Daniel dropped to his knees, covering his ears, but Zelie didn't stop. Taro joined. Their voices merged and something happened. The air ripped open behind the Monitor. A rift, a black tear in the sky, and from it came others. Not monsters, but beings made of light, with the same glowing eyes as Zelie and Taro. Not soldiers, not weapons, witnesses, watchers, guardians. Zelie fell to her knees, exhausted. The Monitor tried to rise again, but the beings caught it, wrapped it in chains made of sound and starlight. It screamed once more, then disappeared into the rift, gone, forever. Silence. Real. Silence. The wind was soft again. Daniel rushed to the kids. Are you okay? Zelie nodded. It's over. Taro smiled faintly. I don't feel the voice anymore. The being stood before them one last time, then bowed. Zelie looked up. Are we like you? One of them answered, not with words, but with a feeling. You were always more. And then, they vanished. Days passed. The ruins were empty now. Daniel sat on a hill watching Zelie and Taro play with a ball made from spare wires and tape. They laughed. Real pure laughter. No chains. No control. Just children. A voice came from behind. A rescue ship, finally answering the signal Daniel had sent before the tower mission. A young officer stepped out. We got your message? Survivors? Daniel nodded. 2. The officer looked at the kids. Aliens, Daniel smiled. No, just kids. That night, Zelie curled beside Daniel and whispered, You heard me, didn't you? When? In the smoke. Back when I cried. Daniel looked at the stars. Yeah, I heard you. And that cry changed everything. The end.